My wife tried to pass off another man's baby as mine, so I left her with absolutely nothing. I, 37 male, and my wife, 37 female, have been together for about 15 years, married for 10 of those. Back when we were still dating, we were really big on children. I had a lot of siblings growing up, most of them younger than me, and I've always been great with kids. My wife also always pictured a family with 3 or 4 children since she was young, so we were well in sync on that. Unfortunately, as you grow older, you realize that everything doesn't always go the way you want it to. After we got married about 10 years ago, that quickly became clear. We had dated for about 5 years, so we never felt the need to take our time with anything. We went straight to trying to conceive, but it just didn't work for us, which was very sad. When I say that, we tried everything. I really mean it. Even things that, wouldn't normally work. But we were so desperate for a baby that we really can't blame ourselves for going all the way. Well, here's a bit of a spoiler. It's been 10 years, and we don't have a baby yet. That's a major part of why I'm writing this. As all couples trying to conceive know, there have been times when it seemed like things had finally happened, only for that time of the month to show up sometimes late. There were about 2 instances where we actually got a positive pregnancy test, but about 2 months later, in both cases, she miscarried, which was extremely painful for both of us to experience. I know I'm talking a lot about things that have happened in the past, but I think it's important for you to understand how much we both wanted a child. And before you ask, we've been to several doctors. I've had my manhood tested more times than I'd like to admit. And yes, my little swimmers passed with flying colors. My wife has also had many different medical tests done for her, and for the most part, the experts couldn't determine why we might be unable to conceive. We tried IVF as well, but that failed. We considered adoption and surrogacy, but we might be a bit too old-fashioned for that. And those options likely won't expire for us, at least not anytime soon. So there really isn't a rush until we figure out that we truly can't have a child on our own. Also, it's important to realize how much we've gone through at the hands of relatives who both come from rather traditional families. That's likely why we're so big on kids. However, not being able to have our own children yet has backfired, because traditional families like ours view children as almost a necessity. Without them, you've somehow failed at life. I blame very strong religious beliefs for that. My wife took the brunt of it from both sides of the family, although I haven't been exempt either, especially with male relatives, making dumb comments about how they've never seen a man from our family unable to put a baby in someone. Again, I've gone through all the tests any man can go through, and I really don't think I can be convinced further that there's nothing wrong with me. Anyway, that's enough background. Let me get to the actual story. My wife and I sleep with each other very frequently. It used to be because we were trying for a baby, but eventually it just became a habit. Even after we reached a point where both of us mostly accepted that it wasn't going to happen for us on my side, I still wanted to know that I tried my best to have a child of my own, so I wouldn't start to wonder whether I could have done more by the time I'm 80. Since we do the deed so often, there's really no room for me to suspect foul play. On the rare occasion that we thought she might be pregnant this time around, she missed her period, and we started to get excited. But of course, we had to temper that excitement because we'd gone a decade without any luck in the pregnancy department. So why would we put all our hopes on a missed period? However, after the next period was missed, my wife decided to take a pregnancy test, and lo and behold, it was positive. Honestly, I was ecstatic. Sure, there was a bit of doubt and apprehension that she'd miscarry like the other times, but I think that side of me was a lot less than I thought it would be. I felt like being very positive about it would help the chances of the pregnancy making it through to the end. Of course, 9 months is a long time, but I had hope. Well, thankfully, the pregnancy actually got to the 5 month mark, and I genuinely don't think I've ever been happier in my life because we'd never had a pregnancy last that long before. Honestly, I had been hopeful, but there was a part of me that never imagined I'd see a pregnancy get to that point. My wife was so happy too, obviously, and I was glad to see her like that because she really got the worst part of the scrutiny from relatives, and this was like a big middle finger to all of them. In fact, I noticed that my wife's relatives were so much nicer to me than they had ever been. While it sucked that it seemed part of their kindness was locked behind us having a baby, I was glad to have it regardless. Now, the part where I realized that something might have been wrong was when we were watching a local TV show, and there was a plot line about a woman who cheated on her husband and got pregnant with her lover's baby. This was a show we watched quite a bit, but I noticed something was off when my wife said she wanted to watch something else. She wasn't too pushy about it, and when I asked why she wasn't interested anymore, she put on a show about pregnancy. A lot changes when a woman is pregnant, so honestly, I wasn't too suspicious about it. I eventually switched to another program, and she seemed more settled at that point. But for the rest of the night, she was acting odd, and I noticed her shooting me glances. Apart from that, I didn't dwell on it too much. I think it became evident that I had to figure things out when my wife and I were watching TV on another day, a few days after that. I remember it was a weekend, and the exact same episode of that show came on as a rerun. Her reaction was very similar. She suddenly didn't feel like watching it anymore. That was when I realized that I might have to get to the bottom of things. I asked her if she was okay, and she said that she was again citing the pregnancy as the reason for her wanting to watch something else. That time around, I didn't notice any odd behavior, though maybe I simply wasn't as observant. The second time, I was really overthinking things at that point. The day after which was just a few days ago, I spoke to one of my good friends about the whole situation, and he was the one who made me see that it could potentially be a case of my wife feeling uncomfortable with what had happened in the TV episode, because that's what she was guilty of. Honestly, it sounded very ridiculous to me, but the more he spoke, the more it started to make sense. The thing is, I didn't want to accept what he was saying, because that would potentially mean that what is supposed to be the happiest moment of my life is about to turn into a whole case of treachery and infidelity, and I really don't know if I can deal with that. Honestly, I'll admit that part of me doesn't even want to dive into this to potentially find the answers, because I'm afraid that what I find could devastate me. After waiting for so long for a child, I'm not really sure whether I could take that if it were to happen. So that's what brings me here. I've tried my best to drop all the details I can about the situation. Hopefully, you guys might have a theory or two about why that specific episode of the show makes my wife so shifty. And maybe it has nothing to do with what happens in that episode. Maybe it really is just the pregnancy hitting her at the worst times. I'll stick around to read comments and answer the ones that I can. Edit. I see some people asking me to detail her reaction to the episode a bit better, so I'll try to. When the show came on and the episode started, she settled in with excitement, the way she always does, especially when it was clear that it was an episode that we hadn't seen before. However, as the plot point started to become clearer and clearer, I noticed that her excitement wasn't as noticeable as before. Again, I didn't think too much of it at the time because her reason for it was very valid. However, it was the second time, a minute or two into the episode, once it was clear it was a rerun, and she realized what episode it was a rerun of. That's when a similar change in her demeanor came up. This time around, we didn't even get to the part where it was clear that it was a story about infidelity. Again, I didn't pay attention this time because I was really wondering what was going on, and I must have sort of zoned out, but I genuinely don't think she acted as weird as the first time. Maybe because we didn't actually get to that part of the episode. Edit 2. Someone said I should ask her straight up. The 10 years of marriage are meant to afford honesty. You have much to learn is all I can say. Edit 3. I've gone through like 90% of the comments, but they keep popping up, so I'll have to call it quits at this point. But I've seen a lot of supportive comments and suggestions, so I'll see what my next move could potentially be, and I'll get back to you all. Thanks. Looks like someone's got a secret recipe for drama bubbling on the back burner. OP. It seems your wife's more eager to change the channel than a politician during a tough interview. But hey, who knew a TV show could hold so much power? It's like she's trying to avoid the guilty pleasure of watching her own life unfold on screen. I mean, forget reality TV. Your living room is the real hotspot for suspense and plot twists. Maybe she's just trying to keep her latest masterpiece under wraps. Cue the dramatic music, because this is shaping up to be one heck of a cliffhanger. Update 2. This isn't the kind of update I was looking to give, but I think it's only right that I let you all know how things went. There's a lot of good advice in the comments of my first post, and I was really ready to sculpt a plan for some of the suggestions that were made, but my emotions ultimately got the better of me, and everything fell apart. Honestly, considering the paternity of a child I've desired for over a decade is on the line, I really don't think you can blame me for that. At least I hope you don't. So the idea I was hoping to go for was to find a chance to look through her messages by borrowing her MacBook. I would also be able to look at her social media, and I knew her laptop would be a better bet if I needed more time than her phone. I was trying to figure out how to make an excuse for why I couldn't use my own laptop, but honestly, I didn't get a chance to get that far. My wife and I have usually been truthful with each other, and all the emotional stress I was going through, overthinking the situation, made me finally ask her straight up. Looking back, I realized how utterly stupid that was, and I keep beating myself up over it, but the way my mind was, back then, I just needed to get the weight off and find the truth. So yes, I asked her straight up. I think the way it came out of my mouth was something like, why were things different this time? We didn't do anything different. So why did it work this time? I know the test said there was nothing wrong with me, but I've been overthinking whether the baby is mine. Needless to say, she flipped out. I started trying to calm her down because I was very concerned about her fury not affecting the baby. But obviously, I had just accused her of cheating on me and trying to pass someone else's baby off as mine, so even I can say it was justified. I feel like complete crap every time I replay how things went. Honestly, it was very unpleasant. Eventually, she calmed down, but she told me that I couldn't stay at home that day. Again, I felt like it was justified, and I think from her reaction and how genuine it seemed to me that I actually messed up, it has to be my baby at this point. I really hope that I'll be able to get her to forgive me. There's only one thing that makes me feel a bit uncertain, though. As I was grabbing a few things that I'd need to spend the night somewhere else, I heard her on the phone talking to someone in hushed tones. The problem is, I don't know who it was, and I couldn't hear a word. I just know there was whispering going on. By the time I went back to the room, she wasn't on the call anymore. That part is making my paranoia kick in. But I saw where that took me the last time, so I'm really trying to wash it out of my head and not think too much of it. Honestly, this happened 2 days ago. This is my second night out of the house, and I decided that I might as well write this all here as a way of letting my emotions escape. I'm looking forward to what you all have to say about the situation, though I'm afraid your input may eventually lead to even more overthinking. I can handle it, though, I hope. Let it rip pending whenever my wife will let me back home. Edit. This is what I was afraid of. Someone said that her anger was simply good acting, and maybe being kicked out of the house is a ploy for my pregnant wife to move her lover in for a few days and roam around. I don't know why, but I think that is very unlikely. Well, the moving in part, at least, because now I'm overthinking whether she's now more openly engaging with him since I'm nowhere around. The situation isn't fun. Edit 2. Okay? So the general consensus is that her episode of rage doesn't necessarily mean that she's innocent. Apparently, I'm too trusting, though she's my wife, so I should trust her to some degree. Right? I do see the point everyone is making. I had a cheating partner when I was much younger, and gaslighting comes easy to them. So I think I'm going to agree that I was too quick to accept her anger as the answer I was looking for. Edit 3. So this might be a bit of a longer edit, but it should be the last one for now. I'm back at home, though it took a total of 4 days for me to be let back in. I'm back now, though, and that's what matters. There was a whole period of awkwardness, but things sort of got back to normal relatively quickly. Almost as soon as they did, I decided to use my brain this time and keep my emotions under wraps. I decided to go through with the laptop plan that I had, and I actually got her to hand the laptop to me, apparently, with no suspicion. The problem is, I found nothing. There wasn't a single suspicious person in her messages, and trust me, I went deep through the messages of people who were unfamiliar to me. I checked her Facebook too, but I couldn't check her Instagram because it wasn't logged in on her computer, so I couldn't take a look at that. But honestly, there didn't seem to be anything amiss. The only thing of note was that she seemed to talk quite often with a guy called Ryan. But I dug through her messages and found nothing even remotely inappropriate. Again, I may be overthinking things, but now I'm wondering whether things were too clean. Maybe she got rid of everything close to inappropriate between her and Ryan. The thing is, I know there's no way for me to prove my theory unless she slips up. So for now, I'll just keep observing, but I just want to say, I really want to be proven wrong. I don't know if I can take the heartbreak of being on the cusp of becoming a father and having that taken from me. I'm scared of what I'll become if it happens. Hopefully it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't. First off, kudos for trying to be all sneaky with the laptop plan. But let's be real here. Trying to play detective in your own marriage is like trying to juggle flaming swords while riding a unicycle. It's bound to end in disaster. And speaking of disaster, let's talk about that awkward 4-day hiatus from home. I'm guessing it felt less like a romantic getaway and more like an extended episode of Survivor Marriage Edition. But hey, you made it back in one piece, so that's something. Now, about this whole Ryan situation. Sounds like a real nail biter. I mean, who knows? Maybe Ryan's just a really good listener who happens to share your wife's love of cat videos and conspiracy theories. Although that's highly unlikely, I think you know exactly who Ryan is. Update 3. Again, I've messed up big time, and I don't even know who to blame beyond myself. Honestly, it was another case of me starting to lose my mind because of the uncertainty of the entire situation. I'm the kind of person who, when feeling like there's a 10% probability of something being a lie, starts to get paranoid and overanalyze that 10% until I can get a solid answer. At this point, once I started to doubt that the child was mine, that's when things started to go to crap. I'd blame my friend who suggested the scenario first, but most of you agreed with his assessment of the situation. So I suppose I was just too dumb to see it myself. Anyway, I'll cut to the chase and say that I ended up talking with my wife regarding the situation again. I knew it could potentially end horribly, so I started the entire conversation trying to paint my emotions in a way where she'd understand that I wasn't accusing her outright. I just needed the reassurance at this point. True honesty wasn't enough for me, so I needed conclusive evidence so I could go back to living my life normally. Boys, I asked her to do a DNA test. Big flipping mistake. We sat in the living room, and after I explained everything, to which she quietly listened and didn't explode, like the last time I suggested that she go for an uterine DNA test. I had done some reading and realized that I didn't even need to wait for the baby to be born before it could be made certain whether I was the father. All it would take was a blood sample, and I told her all of this. She listened in absolute silence and didn't say a word until I asked, "What do you think?" "Yeah, it didn't go well." She simply stood up without a word and went into our bedroom. From the sound of things, I knew that she was packing clothes. A DNA test is probably never going to be an easy thing for a man to ask a woman to get. I don't know whether there's a trick to it, but I suppose a happy marriage might be shaken heavily by a paternity test request. I get it, but I wish she understood where I was coming from too. I simply needed to be reassured. It seemed like the only way to stop me from going crazy, because I was about to have my first child after waiting for so freaking long. And the sudden success had me so concerned. I know how stupid it sounds, and how unfair it is to her, but that means there was no way to get what I really wanted after so long that I wouldn't have been suspicious of her. Maybe things just finally clicked, and all the stars were aligned right, but I still needed the reassurance. I know it makes me an insecure guy. I've told myself that already. She eventually left the house. I tried to stop her, but she just wordlessly held a hand in my face, and I let her go. I felt so defeated, because even an idiot could have told you that crap wouldn't have ended well, but it was such an impulsive thing. Anyway, she's walked out on me, and she's not picking up my phone calls. It's been a week already. I've been able to speak to her sister with whom she's currently living, so I know she's fine, and I know where she is. Her entire family hates me now and has spent every brief opportunity since cursing me out. The part that hurts the most is that I'm finally about to have a baby, and I've soured the entire thing. She told me that she wants a divorce over text, and I haven't had the guts to reply. I'm in no rush to pursue that, and I doubt I'm going to be served at any point before the baby is born, because that's the last thing you want to waste money on with a baby on the way. So, yeah, if you were hoping for an update where I came out justified and validated having realized she was cheating on me with her fitness instructor, this isn't one of those stories. All I can really say is the moral of the story is to think before you do rash things like I did, or maybe try and find other means to find the truth. When I didn't see anything on her phone, I should have known there was nothing to be found. That's it for me. I mean, asking for a DNA test is like bringing a sledgehammer to a game of Jenga. Sure, you might get some answers, but you're also guaranteed to bring the whole dang tower crashing down. And from the sound of it, your tower of marital bliss is now in ruins. But I feel like your wife lit that fuse a long time ago. And speaking of regret, let's talk about the text message bombshell. I want a divorce. Ouch. It's like your life turned into a country song overnight, complete with heartache, misery, and a choir of disapproving in-laws. But then again, why would your wife want a divorce unless she had someone to take care of her? And whoever's baby, that is, update 4. I can't believe that I'm back here posting. It has been about a year since my last update. I came here with a story about finally conceiving with my wife after trying for over 10 years. I basically accused her of cheating because I felt like some minute signs were pointing to infidelity, and I overthought my way into a separation. There's a huge update and conclusion to this story, and honestly, I myself cannot believe how much things have been flipped upside down. There's some benefit to overthinking, to be honest, but I can't say I'm entirely happy with how things have turned out. Here it is, my wife, and I remained separated until the baby was born. It was very bittersweet for me because I was so overjoyed to finally have my baby in my arms, but I knew that custody would soon start being a problem because that divorce was eventually going to come. I also hated the fact that I always wanted to give my child an amazing, wholesome family, but things were going to be split from the very start. That part felt like crap. However, there was a bit of a truce in the early stages, and I was able to come and see my daughter any time that I wanted to, which I really appreciated. She was so beautiful, and I really think that there's nothing quite like the feeling of holding your first child in your arms. My wife and I never really discussed the situation with one another, but I sort of felt like it was hanging in the air. I guess it was going to come up eventually, when the euphoria of our child wore off. I think it was when our child was about to turn 1 that she eventually served me with papers. Honestly, it came out of nowhere. The topic never came back up for discussion. It felt like she waited until a moment when I was feeling at peace and off guard before she hit me with that. And it was brutal. I don't know if I can express how much it hurts to know that you won't be in the life of a child that you desired so badly as much as you want to be in that child's life. Imagine needing to fight over holidays and weekends and all that kind of crap. I was not looking forward to that at all, and I was imagining the effect that it was potentially going to have on my child at a point. Here's where things change up. I had taken a passive role in taking care of my daughter because simply setting foot in my sister-in-law's house where my wife and my daughter were living always had me being treated like a serial killer. Everyone was always so hostile toward me, and I felt like I deserved it, but it honestly was not easy for me to deal with at all. I still powered through all of that because I needed to see my girl, and that was what mattered to me more than anything else. Fortunately for me, there came a weekend where my wife wanted to attend a wedding in a nearby city, and I volunteered to have my daughter stay with me for the day. She fought against it pretty hard, but since her sister would be going to the same wedding, they knew it was convenient to keep her with me. I wasn't going to kidnap her or do anything rash, so they eventually gave in to my request. This was the first time I had been left alone for an extended period of time with my daughter. And as I looked at her, all my overthinking came back to me. I thought of my stupid paranoia that got me and my daughter in this position in the first place, and it suddenly clicked to me that I could get conclusive proof of whether the girl was my daughter or not. At this point, I fought in my head for about an hour regarding heading to a clinic to get a paternity test done, but I realized in the end that it was the only way to put my worries to rest. I got in the car and headed straight to the clinic. When I got there, they made it clear that the results I would be getting would be merely informational. They wouldn't be legally admissible. But that was fine by me. I was simply using the results to put my own head to rest. I showed ID, had a cheek swab done, and so did my daughter. When the process was over, I was told it would take about a week for me to get my results. My daughter eventually went back to her mother the next day when she got back from the wedding. But honestly, that 1 week waiting for the results was absolutely brutal for me. I felt like I was going to lose my mind, and I called the clinic on 2 occasions before the week had passed to ask if the results were ready. I knew that this was the one thing that would finally put everything to bed, and if the paternity test was confirmed, I would know that I deserved everything I got for doubting my wife. In fact, I was ready to beg her to take me back. I wouldn't have any pride. Eventually, the results were ready, and I went to pick them up. It was negative. I wasn't the father. It's hard for me to express the way I felt holding that paper in my hands. I was awake, but it was like my body stopped working. I couldn't react in any way. I was processing very complex emotions. Because think of it like this. I realized that all the victimization that I had gone through was unjust. I was right all along. I had reasons to be suspicious, as weak as it might have been. But did the strength of my suspicion matter? When I was right in the end, I had been gaslighted. My in-laws treated me like a villain. I had played a sideline role in my daughter's first year of life. But that's when it hit me. This really wasn't all about my wife and me. The girl that I considered my daughter wasn't mine. I had lost myself in being proven right that it took a minute or two for the weight of the betrayal to hit me. I didn't have a daughter. The girl wasn't my daughter. I wanted a child incredibly badly, and the child that I was overjoyed to have wasn't mine. Yes, I realized that if my wife was able to get pregnant with another man's baby, I might have been the problem all along. But even if I can't find the happiness I was looking for because of something out of my control, it doesn't mean that I deserve the pain of having the joy of my own child snatched from me. I got home and I cried my eyes out. I drank to shut out the pain, and I don't think I've ever had as much to drink. It was terrible because I was a shut-in for about a week again. I really don't know how to put into words the way I felt at that moment. I kept thinking very dark thoughts about my wife. I wanted all the negative emotions to be taken out on her. I don't think you can blame me after such a revelation. It was a lot. Anyway, let me skip all the woe is me garbage. I contacted a divorce lawyer, which I hadn't done despite being served for quite some time. At that point, I was really dragging my feet on signing the papers, and it had almost been a month by then. I decided to get serious, though, because all I could really do was vindicate myself regarding the girl I had thought was my daughter. I really didn't know how to proceed. Should I remain in her life? I had fallen in love with her. And while many of you might say, there's no point in raising another man's child, It really is easier said than done when it was time to get into this entire divorce song and dance. I already knew things weren't going to be easy. My wife and her lawyer must have thought they'd be going in to present me as an insecure man who accused his wife of cheating multiple times, but they had no idea that I had something up my sleeve. My lawyer submitted a petition to the court for a legal paternity test to be done, and I saw my wife freeze on hearing that. Her face will forever be frozen in my mind, and it made me incredibly happy to see that, especially when my lawyer gave a little hint that an informational test might have been done prior to leading to this request. The look my wife gave me was like she wanted to leap across the table and throttle me. All I could do in that moment was smile at her because I felt like I had won. To be honest, I was in the kind of situation where I couldn't truly win, but this was the best I could get seeing her know that I know. Her lawyer tried to fight the request, but only so much, because if you're so confident that you weren't sleeping around, there wouldn't be any reason to so vehemently fight a paternity test request. She gave her consent, and so did I. Eventually, our daughter was taken for a sample to be collected, and another sample was taken for me at an accredited facility. Needless to say, it was the same. I wasn't the father. It hurt almost as much as the first time because I had secretly hoped that the test was going to show something different. She literally could not meet my eyes after that point. After everything, all the gaslighting, I was made to feel like a crappy partner for accusing her of infidelity, and maybe I am for that, but I was clearly very right to. The entire divorce was to follow up on her gaslighting and probably to cover up her tracks. Well, it was going to come anyway, with this revelation. So I guess the head start didn't hurt. There were more than enough text messages from me showing how she had nearly made me lose my mind, calling me crazy, and insulting me for accusing her of such. I had the text from all of my in-laws, too. I was turned into some kind of pariah, but now it was clear that I didn't deserve to go through all of that. The judgment at the end of everything was absolutely nothing for her. The judge was very sympathetic and said that if the child had been mine, he likely would have awarded at least child support, but I had no legal responsibility for that, and he couldn't do anything that would seem to potentially reward her sleazy behavior. I was tempted to let her keep the car that she had, which was in my name, but I really couldn't do that, not after everything. She had family that would support her, but this was a woman that had no house, no car to her name, nothing substantial in the form of finances. Now she had a baby too. Things were suddenly a lot less cushy than they had been some years ago. As for the girl I thought was my daughter, she wasn't even 2 years old by the time everything concluded, and it wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I had to let her go. It hurt like hell, and it still does, thinking of how I was betrayed into finally thinking that I had a child I desired so much. But I realized that her remaining in my life would be a constant reminder of that pain. Even if I chose to adopt her as my own, I know there might be a lot of people who disagree with me doing this, but the child's real father is out there somewhere, and hopefully he'll step up to the plate. I've never figured out who she had the child with. I kind of assume it was the Ryan guy I saw her texting with, but I can never be sure, and I am eager to close that chapter of my life. Once the divorce was finalized, I made sure to send an image of the paternity test to every single person who knew my ex-wife closely, and I added a very tasteful text message for all of the in-laws who had come for my throat. Honestly, I'm glad that everything is over now. I don't feel like I really won, but I'm glad to come out on the other end of everything, having proven myself right. I didn't have to live a life that was a lie, and perhaps I can find someone who will be a lot better for me in the end. Who knows? There is the satisfaction of knowing that my ex-wife will basically be starting her life from square one. But I think she deserves that. In fact, I think she's getting off mildly. I wish there were more pain for her, but there's a kid in the mix now. And as much as I want to detach from her, I don't want her to get caught in the middle of things. But anyway, a big thank you to everyone for sticking around. I'm glad to be at the end of this journey, and all I can say is to always trust your gut when something seems off. It isn't really worth it when you feel like you might be right, and you beat yourself up over it. I'm glad I followed my gut, because I finally feel free now. And it's the first time I felt just a little bit good in a long time after a year of emotional gymnastics. You finally get the DNA test results you've been sweating bullets over, and what do you find? Or surprise, surprise, you're not the father. Not content with just dropping the paternity bombshell, you decide to go full-on Avenger of the Betrayed mode. You unleash the fury of 1,000 scorned lovers upon your ex-wife and her unsuspecting in-laws, serving up those DNA test results like a piping hot dish of revenge. You gotta love it. But hey, at least you can rest easy, knowing you've finally proven yourself right, because nothing says victory like being vindicated in the eyes of your ex's entire social circle. Am I right? Here's to trusting your gut, even when it leads you down the darkest, most twisted paths imaginable. Cheers, buddy. You've earned it. Sorry for your luck, OP. What do you make of this? Let us know below, and thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.